The Russia-Ukraine war, President-elect Trump expected to review sanctions placed on Russia since its invasion of Ukraine. Mr. Trump expressed interest in reversing those sanctions and has promised to end the war and, quote, stop the killing. Joining me right now, former Obama campaign foreign policy advisor and State Department official David Tafuri. Good to see you again, David. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely. We wanted to ask you about these sanctions. You know, it's been pretty intense. Russian banks, the wealthiest oligarchs, the Russian oil industry, all have been sanctioned. But have they been effective at all?
You know, the sanctions have worked in some ways in the sense that it has reduced the ability of Russia to generate revenues. But unfortunately, it has not crippled Russia's ability to continue to manufacture weapons and support its military. And in fact, Russia is now allocating 30 to 40% of its budget to the military. So it is surviving despite sanctions. I would also note that the Biden administration worked with our European allies to put a price cap on oil sales by Russia. That was intended to hurt Russia, but not prevent Russia from selling any oil around the world. But unfortunately, while that has forced Russia to sell below market, Russia is still making a profit and still making revenues. So if you want to really cripple Russia, then you have to put new sanctions on Russia. You have to augment the sanctions, and especially you have to focus on the energy sector and put secondary sanctions on the companies, the shipping companies, and other middlemen who help Russia sell its oil. I've been hopeful that President Biden would put a new sanctions package out there before he leaves office. And there's been a lot of chatter about that. But for some reason, the Biden administration has not done that yet. As you referred to, Trump may not want to do that. But other reports suggest that Trump is considering keeping sanctions in place on Russia in order to force Putin to the negotiating table.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I want to make sure I stay on track here. But in the time that we've had this conflict during the Biden administration, we really haven't heard much from Vladimir Putin. But since President-elect Trump was nominated, or rather won the election in November, we've heard much more from Putin. In fact, just in the past week or two, he's talked about peace talks with Ukraine and that Slovakia could host them. He's talked about being open to meeting with President Trump. So do you and others in the international community see a difference here? And does that give you some hope that potentially President-elect Trump, soon to be President Trump, will actually get this war to end?
I think Putin is being clever. He wants to ingratiate himself with President Trump. He believes he has a good friendship with President Trump, and he wants to capitalize on that. So I think he has to say that he's open to a deal because that's what Trump wants. But whether he actually would be reasonable and make compromises that he needs to make in order for there to be a deal is another question. You have to remember, President Zelensky and President Putin are very far apart in what they want. And notably, President Zelensky cannot do a deal unless he gets a security guarantee, which either means Ukraine gets promised it's going to be part of NATO, or it gets a direct security guarantee from the US, the UK, and France, and other countries that could defend it if attacked by Russia after a deal. But those are the things that Putin doesn't want. He definitely does not want Ukraine to be part of NATO, and he doesn't want any Western country giving Ukraine a security guarantee. So that's where I see there to be a big obstacle to a final deal, and that's what Trump is going to have to get over the hump on. And I'm not sure he's going to be able to, but at least, as you said, Putin is saying he's open to a discussion.
Okay, but what we have here, though, when we think about it, is we have Russia, which is massive, which has blown through hundreds of thousands of their soldiers. I mean, they've just been decimated in some ways, but they have a much bigger country than Ukraine. Then you have Ukraine, which just launched a massive counteroffensive in the Kursk region of Russia. They have some of the best technology because of their alliances with people like the U.S., quite notably. Couldn't one argue that removing the sanctions on Russia could be the leverage that President Trump needs to get a ceasefire from Moscow?
I agree with you. That does give us some leverage. But remember, despite all the sanctions we put on Russia, Putin has continued. So he believes that his country can continue and can be successful, even if it suffers under these sanctions for years into the future. So it is some leverage, but I'm not sure it's enough leverage to force Putin to agree to what he said he will never agree to, which is Ukraine becoming part of NATO or getting a security guarantee.
Thanks so much for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.